Eurozone inflation is continuing to increase to record highs. Almost every country on the continent is facing rising prices. Europe is expected to economic recovery from the coronavirus pandemic, but it's being hampered by several factors. The prices of many commodities, including food, have been rising ever since the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns. However, the conflict in Ukraine has dramatically worsened the outlook, as Russia has been the EU's top supplier of oil, natural gas, fertilizer, and coal. The EU statistics bodies are predicting annual Eurozone inflation to be as high as 10% this year. International Monetary Fund had downgraded the Eurozone's big four economies, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain's growth forecasts for 2023. Many analysts are already predicting a recession in Germany, Italy, and the rest of the Eurozone before the end of the year 2022. What went wrong for Europe? The popular mainstream narrative is that Europe is in a dire situation because Russia is blackmailing Europe with its energy. Cutting off Russian energy is one of the reasons for Europe's crisis, but there are other aspects to this problem as well. Let's have a look at some of them. The major reason is poor policy after the year 2008 financial crisis. Eurozone went into the financial crisis with lending rates on the lower side, leaving less room to cut rates when it matters. Compared to US Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank was more reluctant to unveil a quantitative easing program to push its economies. Even the countries with the capacity to spend to stimulate their economies, like Germany, France, and the Netherlands, did too little. While Spain's stimulus was poorly designed, Italy was more interested in balancing its books at the time. Economies like Greece and Italy were not in a good shape for a decade before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, EU infrastructure investment was at a 15-year low, with the greatest declines in regions that were already lagging. Initiatives, such as the European Economic Recovery Plan of 2008, and the European Commission Investment Plan, in 2014, to upgrade infrastructure were too little. The overall impact was a weak Europe. Germany and the Eurozone as a whole were showing 0% growth at the time of the COVID outbreak, while the economies of Austria, France, and Italy were all contracting. The next factor is wrong economic and geopolitical policies and calculations. Europe's arrogant, self-righteous posturing over Russian gas supplies made it difficult. A lack of understanding of geopolitical reality made things even worse. The Western mainstream media has to carry a major share of the blame for these serial failures of diplomacy. There were no discussions about how the economic events will unfold, and ordinary Europeans heard very little of how things might look from Russia's perspective. On that front, Europe, same as Russia, must shoulder the blame for the energy crisis. Next, let's see what lies ahead for Europe. There will be a darker, colder, and possibly hungrier winter. Cheap energy is the lifeblood of modern economies. The energy sector, in normal times, accounts for only a small fraction of total GDP for most advanced economies. But it has an outsized impact on inflation and input costs for all sectors because of its wide consumption. In normal times, Europe's energy costs account for 2% of GDP, but it has soared to an estimated 12% on the back of surging prices. High natural gas prices will affect Europe's aluminum manufacturers, fertilizer producers, metal smelters, and glassmakers. High costs of this magnitude will lead many industries across Europe to either scale back their operations or shut down completely. Higher energy prices will further escalate inflation. Inflation will force Europe's central banks to hike the Eurozone's interest rates, which will make borrowing more difficult for European businesses. Declined investments will trigger the unemployment rate, putting extra pressure on already strained economies. On the other hand, a cap on energy prices alone won't bring down the price of oil and gas, as it is more or less a supply issue. Unlike the year 2008 financial crisis, the current financial crisis is a physical crisis rather than a psychological crisis. In the year 2008, if you get scared of spending, so you could stop spending. When you feel comfortable with the spending, you could come back. That's not what's happening right now in Europe. To solve this puzzle, Europe has to restore the supply. In the short term, a cap on energy prices could offer struggling households and businesses relief. However, price caps may not provide a way to reduce energy consumption, which is the chief goal in a world of shortages. High inflation will trigger social unrest. People in Germany, France, the UK, Netherlands, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia have already started protesting over rising inflation. In general, there is widespread dissatisfaction within Europe about the government's response to the crisis. While the majority of voters criticize the government, certain voters are more skeptical of the energy and electrical industries. Even while the people of some nations blame Russia for the crisis, as time goes on they will turn around and demand long-term solutions to the terrible economic issues from their governments. The newly elected Prime Minister of Italy is already raising questions about the EU's position to protect Europe's political and economic interests. Hungary is already on board with her on this front. Ongoing threats, challenges, and disputes will raise a huge question mark on the future of the European Union. What options does Europe have to avoid the recession becoming a depression? Arguably, the most effective way to avoid recession is to apply correct monetary and fiscal policies to tackle soaring energy costs. Since the energy bill will be one of the biggest parts of European consumers' expenses, any relief in energy costs will help their fight against inflation. The only choice left to the EU is to use more expensive liquefied natural gas, which is transported by ship from nations like the United States and Qatar. Although Germany is moving quickly to build LNG import terminals, this process will take years. On the other hand, there is no more production increase in gas available, because worldwide LNG export facilities are operating at full capacity due to the tight energy markets. Moving away from cheap Russian energies to more expensive sources, whether green or fossil, will not help Europe. Russia used to be their biggest and cheapest energy supplier for decades. European households and industries largely benefited from low Russian energy bills, which provided them an edge over their East Asian competitors. In the medium to long run, Europe is going to lose that advantage. Coal and renewable energies are two viable options. Despite the catastrophic impact on the environment, some predict that the EU may have to resort to reactivating old, decommissioned coal plants. If Germany reverted to coal, it would go against its green promise to move away from coal-fired power plants by 2030. Solar and nuclear power are two options to cover the gap. However, numerous nuclear power plants in Europe have reached the end of their life cycles, and it is expensive to rebuild them. Negotiating better deals with other energy suppliers, like Qatar, KSA, UAE, or even Iran or Venezuela, seems to be an option. However, most of Middle Eastern producers are already operating at the maximum level of production. The shift requires a lot of investments, and takes years to accomplish its goal. Moreover, buying oil from Iran and Venezuela means lifting the existing sanctions against those countries, which need serious political willpower. So it is reasonable to assume that those options are not on the table for foreseeable future. When crises are handled poorly, they result in devastating losses, wiping out entire industries, ruining wealth, resulting in a massive loss of jobs, and placing a tremendous financial strain on governments. Even worse, crises have brought down governments, bankrupted entire countries, and provoked retaliatory trade wars between nations. Warfare has even been sparked by crises, much like how World War II was sparked by the Great Depression. Ignoring the current crisis is not an option. So, will this be the end of Europe? Not necessarily. But Europe we used to know will face serious political and economic shifts in the coming months. What do you think about Europe's future? Drop a comment in the comment section. Have a great day. Thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing, liking, and sharing, which means a lot to me. I love to see your thoughts in the comment section.